Hello, I hope you're doing well today. My name is Ian Green, and I'm a musician for Music Dreams and also for Ian J. Green, two different artist profiles you can find wherever you stream your music. And today I'm going to be discussing Unit 11, which is on the fugue, a beautiful and very intricate stylistic element of the Baroque period, and especially is a form of music that Johann Sebastian Bach really mastered. Let's now enjoy some of this material together in more of a generalized way to explain how the fugue works. A fugue is a contrapuntal composition, which means it's based on distinct voices working together. Counterpoint means different voices working in kind of at the same time to create a musical conversation. And usually, there are multiple voices occurring at once. Each fugue is a little bit different, but there are still some fundamental things that are similar between each different fugue that Mr. Bach wrote. So therefore, then, we can have some different general terms that I like to explain in this tutorial, and then also give some tips and tricks on how to apply this material and this information into analyzing the compositions that Mr. Bach wrote. The first and most important thing to know is that there is something called the subject. The subject is usually a very short musical sentence. It's sometimes just a short little motive that might be a couple of bars long. But it's the backbone of the entire piece. All of the other material that is written will follow in some way, will follow the subject. There's also something called the answer. So the answer usually occurs after the first subject. The subject establishes the original key of the piece and also is the musical idea that the composer will use to build the rest of the piece. Now, the answer is kind of like an answer in the sense that it's not going to stay in the same key, but it will have the same rhythmic material as the subject. Now, there's something called the real answer, or the tonal answer. The real answer is a direct modulation and rewriting of the subject, but in a new key. So, for example, if I were to play the piece that is written here, which is from the Fugue in D major from the Well-Tempered Clavier Book 1, here is what the melody sounds like for the first subject. So you can see how there's a musical sentence that moves up and then moves down, and then there's also a jump of a sixth and then stepwise motion. The real answer is exactly the same music, just transposed into the key of the dominant or the key of A major for this next part. So we would call this a real answer because not only is the rhythmic material the same, but all of the intervals are exactly transposed from one scale to another. Now, a tonal answer would have the same rhythmic material, but some of the intervals or pitches within the answer itself are not exactly the same as the subject. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist or it shouldn't be found. It's just that it's not exactly a real answer, because some of the intervals are a little bit different. Now, as well, there is something called the counter subject, which we want to also find. The counter subject is the material consistently accompanying the answer or the subject during the course of the fugue. The counter subject usually occurs after the first subject of the piece, because, of course, we can't have something accompanying something if there's only one voice at the beginning of each fugue. So usually the fugue starts with the subject with only one line of music happening, either in a treble clef or bass clef with keyboard music. Then the counter subject happens directly after, during the answer. And we can tell it's the same counter subject because wherever the answer or the subject occur later in the piece, the same counter subject will occur somewhere else. The same intervallic relationship and the same rhythmic relationship will always be found. Now, Mr. Bach is not always exactly consistent with using a counter subject all the time. But I would say at least 80% of the music that he writes in the fugue style consists of a counter subject, possibly more, possibly a little less. But the counter subject is very much an integral part of the musical detective work that we have to do when analyzing his music. The counter subject can also be flexible in the sense that it can be used anywhere that is not in the same voice as the subject. So let's say the subject is in the bass. We can't have a counter subject in the bass as well. It has to be somewhere else. But then if another subject or an answer goes to the treble, like to the soprano part, then you can have a counter subject somewhere else, maybe in the bass part or the tenor part. Now, something that's interesting as well to please note is that for however many voices there are in the fugue, you'll see how the stems will follow in different directions than what we might traditionally see in piano music. Sometimes you'll see the stems facing up or facing down in kind of funny different ways than what we would see in traditional music, but that helps the musician to see all of the different lines of music. If I were to highlight the soprano part, or even try to draw with, I'll just erase that highlight because it's a bit too thick. If I were to draw a line in the sand here to say this is all soprano, but then you can see how then, if I were to draw with a different color to signify where the next part goes, and then to signify where the next part goes, you can see how there are three different parts occurring at the same time. Here is the next part there, and then the last part at the top. So there's like three different layers. You can have your bass, your alto, and your soprano. It's really quite amazing how Mr. Bach writes this material. Now, usually what we have to do when working with fugues is you're going to be just working on the exposition, which basically means every iteration of the subject and answer that occur based on the number of voices there are in the piece. If there are three voices, for example, you'll have a subject starting, then you'll have your answer with a counter subject, and then there might be other things occurring, and then the next subject will occur with the counter subject as well, and that will be it. Usually it's not the entire fugue. It might just be the first 15 bars or 12 bars. It depends on the piece. Now, if we continue sharing the screen, something that's interesting that I'd also like to explain are something called links, which are different parts that aren't exactly a subject or an answer. We also know of this as the traditional word codetta. So a codetta occurs as a link in between one subject and the next answer. There's not going to be subject-answer trading back and forth during the entire piece. Sometimes Mr. Bach would like to change key to a different key, or he might want to do some kind of sequence or some kind of other element to create a transition from one subject to the next answer. So any of those transitional areas are called links, and those are important to find as well. Usually, in the types of questions that you'll encounter in this book and also on the Level 10 exams, there will be specific bar numbers in which you have to tell which part has a link, and also there might be specific questions about what key the link is in, or how is it related to the subject or the counter subject or something like that. So usually it's good to recognize where the links occur, but the most important thing is to know where the subject is, to know where the answer is, and also where to locate the counter subject. Those are the three main things to find within the exposition of a fugue. I hope that this tutorial was helpful. Thank you so very much for watching. And also, I do hope that you're able to check out some of the other tutorials and other performance videos on this channel. It's a channel that's a labor of love, but I really enjoy making these videos to help share with the greater community. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time.